All right, so I've got a treat today. I've got my old high school buddy, Sean Halls, joining me. We're going to talk about COVID-19 in India. He's stuck in India right now running a team of developers, and we're going to have fun talking about e-commerce in the future as it relates to Amazon, India, e-commerce in general. All right, so now joined by Sean Halls. Sean, it's good to talk with you. Over the years, we've kind of kept in touch here, and our journeys have taken us to other sides of the world. So right now, as I understand it, you're in India, and what was it, just a couple days ago, India announced it's completely shut down. So I'm sure our listeners would love to hear and understand what is going on over there.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me. Great to catch up again. What is going on out here is it's a good question. Some of us want to know that too. There's been a lot of sudden movements. There was one day that things were open, and that was, I think, the 15th of March, or maybe just before that. And then everybody who had businesses got together and said, wait, what's actually happening, including, some of the politicians. And then it was almost overnight, they shut everything down. And it was shut down to the degree my mom and my sister were planning on making a trip out here to visit me. And a day or two before their flight came, all international visas got canceled. So, and then they also said, hey, you can't leave either. So it was
not
kind
only
of,
can your family not get to you, but you can't get to your family.
oh yeah, and they can't even ship because my mom, being my mom, she was like, I'm gonna send you supplies. I'm gonna send you supplies. And so
I know you're
DHL
running
was
out of
saying,
underwear over there, Sean. They don't have your size, so you're laughing because it's true. No, so that's
it's
difficult. I'm sure.
it's been a little chaotic and it's been disheartening. I'm a Christian oriented guy, and it's been really disheartening actually to see on the street, because when you have as there's over 1 billion people in this country, right, and a lot of vulnerable people, but many people only want a day's wage, and they can pay for their food, and maybe they get some lodging, or they live in slums, right? But these people, as soon as that lockdown happened, they're out there starving in the streets. And that's been hard for me to sit up here and feel good on Instagram and doing the whole quarantine at home thing, because I'm seeing people just outside my window, on the street suffering and dying because they can't make any money. And then beyond that, it's difficult because when they can't make money, what's happened is they're trying to migrate back to their villages so that they can at least eat. But you're getting massive congregations. And I mean, while we're social distancing over here, people of privilege, I should say, these migrant workers are huddled in bus stations, and there's hundreds of thousands of them, and they're going to actually be infecting each other, if you think about this, and then taking it back to rural India where there isn't medical access. So it's a huge problem. And it's, as a humanitarian, that's been kind of what I've been trying to, over the last few days, say, hey, it's nice being in the ivory tower, but how can I help these folks out there? That's been one of the things that's been eating at me.
That is rather difficult. I mean, I'm in the Georgia area, and it's testing is not even really a thing right now in the States. There's a lack of testing, but most of the government shut down. Most businesses are shut down except essentials. But the culture is totally different over here. Whereas what you kind of talked about with the migrant culture in India, there's literally hundreds of thousands of people that are stranded right now. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true, because the government realized that they were going to go back to rural communities, and they said, oh, it became a social media disaster because everybody was looking at these bus stations saying, wait a second, we're about to send these back to rural India. So it actually got worse in that once the people got to the bus stations, they didn't let the buses leave. So really you
Oh,
just have
geez.
these, well, which makes sense. You don't want them crossing borders into places that they're going to take this virus, especially after what they've been through with the crowding. Like, you don't want them to go, but at the same time, you now essentially have, and I don't want to like really overuse this word, but it's like a concentration camp of migrant workers, and they're just stranded, and they're in a situation that's highly ineffective for quarantine or controlling this virus. So I think India is just the tip of the iceberg. There's I was looking at the numbers, and 20 days ago, I think March 10th, the US had 1,000 known cases, which is where India is at now. And that has now gone up to 160,000 in the US. So 20 days from now, what I'm interested in is to see if India has surpassed the US numbers. And I'm pretty sure that they will.
I think it's a question of testing. You know, in the U.S., the numbers have got to be 5x up to 10x what they truly have been reported. Because I mean, you have to be in like an ICU unit right now to get a test in the States in most parts. So who knows what India's healthcare infrastructure can do? But you know, it's interesting that they announced a 21-day shutdown instead of 14, which is what kind of the U.S. and many other countries led with. And then we all know that 14 days is going to turn into 30 and more, but
they're talking about extending this 21 day out to 3 months.
That's got to be a totally new world you're living in right now.
It's interesting for sure. I wasn't planning on going back, so I came out here, Steve, to work on having a dev team. There's a lot of people who want to have offshore development, but they don't want to interface with a team that doesn't have a native English speaker and like a professional English speaker or translator, more or less. And I've been writing code now since I was, professionally for about 14 years. And before that, as a hobby for 6 years. So people love interfacing with me because yes, I have this team, but they have some guy that they trust on the other end, and I can manage and code myself. So they're not saying, hey, we're just in the hands of this group that has no face. So I wasn't planning on leaving, but once stuff started happening, I did make a call to
took a look at it. Yeah.
I called the embassy. I made a call to the embassy.
Is that the first time you ever called an embassy before?
Actually, yeah. And it's funny because when I arrived, many people were like, you got to call the embassy, just get in touch. And I was like, I think I'm okay. I got it. You know, I've traveled a lot. So I was like, I'm good. But this time I did call the embassy, and they were like, hey, we're trying to get some flights for repatriation. I wasn't like anxious to go, but I was curious. The flights out that they're arranging, first off, they're strange. You can't just charge it to a card. You have to sign a promissory note to the government, which I didn't realize. You can't, you have to, it's just like a note. And the flights were $6,000 for a seat and coach.
Wow.
And to put that in perspective, I got out here for the first time I came out here, I think my one way was $375. And then when I flew back in December for Christmas, I got upgraded to business class, and that was like $800 to basically be first class the whole way. And now, you know, just to get back home, if I wanted to come back to the US, would be a solid $6,000. So I think I'm hunkering down here for a minute until that goes down.
That's quite the choice. I mean, man, that's a tough spot to be in. So with things shut down right now, are you still developing, or are there workers still working in some areas?
Tech hasn't. So I guess I should step back and say my specialty in tech has been med tech and medicine, and specifically skilled nursing facilities.
Okay.
And they need us more than ever.
I bet.
So I've seen people pump the brakes with, new projects, anything like that. But what we're maintaining and what we've been doing has been pretty consistent, and people are still needing that, especially right now, because I think of one application we did that reaches out to seniors who have recently exited a skilled nursing facility. And that's more important now than ever, because these people are vulnerable and they're scared, right? And so it's nice to say, okay, the software that we've been doing is having a great impact on the people who need it most right now. And so yeah, people are still developing it in our field. I haven't seen a ton of shift, but obviously if we're talking about just the sheer volume of people who are going to be affected by this, there's no doubt that we're going to experience economic slowdown, and it's only a matter of time. They might need me now, but if the economy starts to collapse or anything like that, it's only a matter of time before everybody is affected.
Yeah, I feel
no matter what vertical you're in.
I feel like this is a once in a 100-year event. There's no doubt about that. I think Amazon specifically is probably recession-proof. E-commerce in general, probably, at least a little bit recession-proof. And even if it's not, I think e-commerce is going to be the first sector that recovers. The question is, in your particular vertical in development work, some of those things have kind of like a run rate or a business development cycle. I would imagine. So the projects that you're going to start in 3 months or 6 months from now, that's probably when you'll see the hit. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
do you think you'd be sooner?
I think the hit has already, in a sense, happened. It hasn't been a hit so much. It's been increased scrutiny on what we've been doing.
Oh yeah, cost control and yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that, and there might be a hit on future work. You're absolutely right. I'm prospecting now, for future work and trying to do that. Luckily, I'm at a place where I've gone through and done enough goodwill with people over the last 10 years and helped people out that I don't feel scared. But you're absolutely right in saying that we're going into 3 to 6 months where things could drastically change the shape, or things just could drastically change in shape and form. I have one friend who was about to kick off a project with me, and he just said, "Hey, wait a second." He has like 50 brick and mortar locations across the USA, and he said, "Wait a second, nobody can come to my store. We gotta halt development for at least a few months until marketing dollars are going to allow for this to make sense."
Yeah, there are people ordering online today that have never ordered online before because they literally can't go to a retail store at the moment, and that's why we're seeing a lot of exceptional amounts of demand specific to Amazon. So yeah, there's a huge amount of effect. I think this year is one for the books, no doubt. All right, so let's take a step back. So Sean and I went to high school together in Utah, and we've known each other for a long time. And so I want to bring us back just a little bit to kind of where our career paths went, and then we'll then ask the big question: why India? Why'd you end up in India? So let's go back a little bit. So what got you first interested in development work when it became kind of a hobby?
All right, Steve, you'll appreciate this because you mentioned high school. I loved Steve because I think as cool as we've become and whatever we've done in our life, I think it's safe to say in retrospect that we weren't the coolest guys in high school.
No, easily not. I'll put my one thing out there. Most embarrassing thing I did in school. I ran for student body officer every year of my entire junior high and high school, and never once was elected. That's how uncool I was.
You sound like actually the case with almost everybody who runs for office. I mean, how many times did McCain ran? It seemed like 800 times. He ran as many years as he was alive.
which is 800 times.
But no, Steve and I knew each other like we were big time chess players. We got into chess together to show you the level of cool we were at.
Level of nerdiness. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would say actually what happened was I was always a geek with computers. When I was a kid, like 5 or 6 years old, my parents had a Windows 3.1 machine, and they didn't know how to use it, but I learned all the typing and keystrokes on that. And really, when I got into coding, it was because I was uncool in high school and I had a lot of spare time in my summers. I think that's even before we met, Steve. I think we met one of those summers where I walked outside and we happened to be at the same place
playing basketball.
Yeah,
It was one of our neighbors' houses. Good old Lincoln Taylor.
Yeah, Lincoln. He's a nice kid. I still talk to Lincoln occasionally.
He's a real estate agent now, I think.
Yeah,
or broker. One
of
the two. Broker.
Yeah,
probably.
Good time to be in that market.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, in the 5 years leading up, the Utah market has blown up.
Yeah, it's definitely true.
So that's kind of what led to me taking it on. And it's funny that, and I'll just, a little aside is that code back then, I used to sit and try and work out the code and try and make it work like the examples. And I just remember crying and saying, this is so hard. I can't make it work like it. This seems like it should be easy. I'm looking at the example. Mine doesn't work that way. It took me like 10 years for the state of the industry to advance to a point to realize that what I was working with back then were the nascent phases of this coding languages, and it sucked. That's what was happening. Is like, the code back then was brutally bad, and the reason it wasn't working is because these languages, like nobody knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I took Java in high school. I didn't know what I was doing either. Yeah.
The guy who wrote PHP, the guy who made it, he did it because he hacked it together and it's like, well, this works for me. And he never meant for it to become a programming language. And now there's 24% of the web, or maybe 40%. It was something crazy like that, is running on WordPress, which is based off PHP. So you look
I
at just the
freaking hate
evolution of
WordPress so
that.
much. I think Shopify, anybody listening to this, if you're not on Shopify and you're on WordPress, I'm so sorry for you guys. It's rough. Really rough.
I'll give a contrarian opinion on that. I think
Sure.
it really depends on what you're doing with your business, because the difference between a Shopify site and a WordPress site is the difference in ownership. If I have a WordPress infrastructure and that tech stack, I own it. And no matter what Shopify does with their business, I'm going to be able to go away and say, okay, I'm not subject to their plans. So if you need to have more control of your business, then I would say stay away from Shopify. If you're running a store and you're running a business and it's working great and you want it to be kind of all the tech's taken care of for you, go with Shopify 100%. But if you need that control and you want to say, okay, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to have this hook into this data source, this data source. The other thing is a lot of the plugins on Shopify are monthly subscriptions.
So I agree with everything you just mentioned. It's just a question of how much control do you want to pay for, right?
Right.
And then also WordPress is constantly breaking on my side, so that's why I mumble through that. It's just constantly breaking. So
that's because us developers need to ensure our future job security.
I guess something like that. All right, so you did stuff through high school, took on some special projects. Was there a turning point or some sort of golden moment in your life where you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this the rest of my life?
Yes, there's been a few. There was one when I kind of mentioned how in 10 years, everything drastically shifted. When I was 18, I made my buddy a website. And at a certain point, that's changed. And I'm talking about where it became the responsive web. And all of a sudden, everything's responsive. And you just had to remake websites differently. And so people I'd made some sites for when I was a little younger, they came and they said, hey, our sites no longer really work in this responsive web. Can you help us out? So I had to sort of relearn what I'd learned. And there was this point where I think I was 20 or 21, where I said, okay, I've gotten really good at building HTML static websites. I got some database stuff figured out. I know PHP. What am I missing? And that's when the beauty of JavaScript and writing really interactive pages came to me. And I think once I started getting into JavaScript, that helped a lot, because all of a sudden I was able to create an experience for a user rather than just showing them something. And that was cool. There was also a night, there's a few poignant moments that stick out. There was a night where I was on, if you guys remember Stumble Upon, it was a little widget that you'd throw in Firefox and it would just take you to a random web page that somebody had curated and thought was neat.
Quite the throwback. Yep.
Yeah, I loved Stumble. But I spent this one night just bored and stumbling, and I realized 95% of the web looked like total crap. And it
Still
kind
does.
of offended.
Still does.
It still does, but it's gotten so much better. But it kind of offended me as just like a visual person. I was like, this is not good. And I wanted to do better. So that was one thing that drove me to do a lot of stuff. I wasn't good enough to do much outside of helping like nonprofits and that kind of thing for a while. And I did a lot of low hanging fruit, but good work for good people sort of thing, to get my chops up. And then I had this bump in at a coffee shop that changed my life forever. It was with my buddy, Jameis Johnson, he's a brilliant machine learning programmer, whatever you want to call him. He works mostly in like this really high, like Haskell, interesting languages, does machine learning, that kind of thing. And he was just a coffee shop, and he sat down and looked at some of my work, and he blew my mind, introduced me to Angular. And he's like, if I were you, I would just start learning this today and go do that. And I ran with that. In the last 8 years, I've been working with Angular, Angular 1, 2, all the way up through now they're at 9 as the time of this podcast. And best decision ever in terms of career, because it was interesting. There's basically Angular and React where everything's getting made in these days. And I moved to Los Angeles. This is last year. I moved to Los Angeles to go work on my career and develop out there. It was super interesting. I just happened. Everybody in LA was doing React, and I happened to be the guy that did Angular. It was just a weird market thing. So that worked out phenomenally for me because React is in vogue, but Angular still has this really, really huge place. So, that's kind of what happened in terms of the career path, in terms
Sure.
in terms of the formative moments.
So you've had a few formidable moments that have happened, and then one day you end up in India. Why India? What brought you there?
Oh, good question. It's not just one day. I've been here 3 times. This is my third trip. It's my first time living here. Um, when I was 25, this is kind of a deeper thing, but maybe 26, 25 or 26, I was my best buddy from University of Utah is an Indian national citizen. He's a genius. He owns a company called Lattice Innovations in Delhi. And I came out to visit him just to go be a tourist, check out India back when I was 25. He was throwing, back then they threw hackathons with Massachusetts General Health. Lattice threw hackathons with Massachusetts General Health. And so my first landing point in India was at a hackathon. We were working on the problem of diabetes, which is a huge killer in India. It's a huge killer everywhere, but in India, it's like 1 out of every 5 people is going to develop diabetes due to the diet.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah, which I think is it's substantially more, by like maybe 3 times more than the U.S. numbers. But
I think we might be on par with that.
You will be if you're not. It's just an upward trend. So I did a lot of work there, met great people in the context of working on innovations, met a lot of great people from Massachusetts General Health who I still talk to, and they became very important for what happened next. 3 days into the hackathon, I got a cold, and it was a minor head cold. And then, but I had to get on a flight. I was going somewhere else, and I had to get on a flight, and it was like an old dinky Indiana Jones propeller jet kind of plane.
Jeez.
It was so old. I was going to these islands just to travel a bit. And during descent, I'm not sure if the plane wasn't pressurized properly or what, but I had this horrible pressure in my skull. And it first, it just felt like it was like, okay, maybe like I just got to pop my ears, but it didn't go away. And as we went further and further and closer towards the earth, the pressure just became profound. And I was basically immobilized in pain. And it felt like every filling in my mouth wanted to pop out, like the pressure in my skull.
Wow.
Well, what happens is your eustachian tube, if that's what regulates your pressure in your body. And we're under atmospheric pressure at any time, but if you can't regulate that, it stays in your skull. So what happened was all my sinuses imploded. And I was alone during this moment. And it also happened that my eardrums went, and I could just hear ocean sounds. I couldn't hear what anybody was saying. Not sure it would have mattered because they were speaking in different languages, but I couldn't get help. And I was just
almost feels like a near-death experience. Jeez.
It was, and I was crying in this airport because I was on a layover, and I'm crying in this airport, and there's guards with machine guns thinking this kid's messed up or something. He's just crying on the floor here. My phone, the adapter's not plugging in, so I can't get in touch with my friends. It's just a weird outlet, and I'm like, this is heavy. And as I'm looking around, Steve, and this was the thing that changed my life, I'm in the worst pain of my life. And I look around, and I'm not the only person collapsed on the floor. And I'm seeing people, and I'm not just one person, 2 people. I'm seeing many people in this scene who are in worse pain than me. And that was a significant eye opener. I didn't really go to India looking for enlightenment, but that was an enlightening moment where I said, whoa, the worst pain in my life isn't the worst pain in this room. And at that point in time, I decided if I ever recovered, I wanted to make my next steps in my career to be about helping people and to be in the medical industry. So that was a huge thing that happened. And India, because of that, has always been in my heart because there is so much suffering here. So part of why I came back this time was because I just knew, yes, I could build my business and help out in the US, but I also felt my value would be very helpful here because I have a lot to offer people here as well.
So that is a pretty terrifying series of events that led you to choose to stay in India, so to speak, and make it a permanent fixture in your life. I mean, that's crazy. So like,
Yeah.
what was the recovery like on that?
It's never been a full recovery. In fact, I still get flare-ups. And if I'm ever on a flight, or if I ever have a cold, even remotely near a flight, um, I cancel the flight typically nowadays, because I still get pressure almost every time I fly. There's a surgery for it, but I haven't exactly wanted to.
I've done nose surgery twice. It is awful,
Yeah,
super
and
awful.
I've done it once, and I'm not rushing to that because it's something I can basically manage nowadays. But I'll tell you, the recovery of that was actually very brutal, and kind of illustrates both the good and bad of India, which was, uh, typically speaking, the Indian healthcare is much more available. I shouldn't say available; it's much more affordable than the United States healthcare, and it's high quality because there's so many patients. So you go to a surgeon, the guy's done 1 billion of these surgeries, right?
Yeah.
Very, very highly skilled. The ability to get into those appointments is what's difficult because there's so many people. So when I landed, I was going to these islands, and I finally did get my phone to work. And I called up my doctor friend who's, thank goodness I have him. Ani Bob, if you're listening, thank you. He basically had me hand the phone over to the guy at the pharmacy at the airport, and he told him to get me basically narcotics, which were available because he was a doctor and I was in the situation I was. And I took those, and all of a sudden I had some relief, but I was still like, it was just managing it. And I had to jump on another flight because it's like, and
Wow, and that much pain jumping on another flight? Jeez Louise.
I did because I was like, well, I can't stay at this other place. I have no, like, my hotel's at the next place. I'm already in this like horrible pain. I might as well just take this flight. Um, and what happens though, the pain never got worse that day, but what happened was the sinuses have imploded. So there's blood inside your canals. And
Oh
that's
my
kind of like a
goodness.
gross thing, but then that congeals. And so the pressure never left.
Wow.
Um, and so I managed for a few days, and I was like, okay, I'm going next to Calcutta, which is a really trippy city. It's like still Britain in 1950. They love British. The British had such an influence there.
I'm sure they drink tea
They've
there.
they drink tea. Not only do they drink tea, they have remade a replica of the Big Ben.
Wow.
They have like a giant Big Ben themselves. They love it, and it's all 1950s ambassador cabs. It's super interesting. But I got there, and there was a religious ceremony going on called Durga Puja, which was a lot of fun. But the whole town, including doctors, was closed for like 2 weeks. I couldn't see a doctor. Um, and it was one of those things where it's like, this is a really great time. I'm having a great time, but I'm in horrible pain every day. And I cannot get to a doctor because they're all on vacation, which is, I don't think that would ever happen in the United States, where an entire country or entire region shut down for 2 weeks so that we could go celebrate, like maybe Christmas, but you could probably still get some appointments somewhere
two
in
days,
Christmas.
yeah, but not like a
Yeah,
full week or longer.
2 weeks. This
Yeah,
was
it's
2 weeks,
very
and we were
very.
trying every day.
It's like a very Asian thing. Even China shuts down for like a month.
Mm.
It's crazy.
So I actually had to take another flight to Delhi, um, before I got to see an ENT. And when I saw an ENT, he goes, I've been doing this all my life. He was like 70. I've never seen a case of aerosinusitis. That's what I had, or barotrauma. I've never seen a case this bad. There's no way you should have flown more than once. When is your next flight? And I was like, I'm going back to America in 3 days. And he goes, oh no, you need to be like on steam and all these blood thinners. You need to be on this for at least 2 months before you fly again. I was like, well, I got this flight in 3 days. And he just sighs and he goes, well, good luck. And,
He knew at that point there was nothing he could say to change what you were going to do. And that's, I'm sure, a lot of doctors feel that way all the time. Sometimes as an agency owner, I'm like, hey, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, we need to make these changes. And they're like, well, XYZ reason we can't do ABC. And I'm like, okay, good luck. I'm sure that happens to you too. So I can relate.
So that's the story of what brought me out to India. And then this last time, I'm not going to say that Hollywood was shallow. I spent some time in Hollywood. I made a lot of great friends. I just realized that Hollywood had its bases more or less covered in a lot of ways, whereas India, there was a lot of growth and development that I could contribute to. So That's sort of the story about India.
So let's talk about one last thing, and then we'll wrap up here. So where do you think the future is going with e-commerce development? Just any future outlook you think, let's think post coronavirus impact. Where do you think the future of the world's going?
Oh man, what a great question. I think, touching back on what you mentioned earlier, e-commerce is not only recession proof. I think this has shown us that without e-commerce, we'd all be screwed. Um, we would be like, I'm seriously living right now on food delivery because I guess I had assumed during this lockdown I wasn't going to be a hoarder because the grocery store was going to stay open, that sort of thing. And that's what was publicized, that you wouldn't have to panic, like, please don't panic, the grocery stores will stay open.
When they tell you to stop hoarding, that's when you know you need to be hoarding. That's a
Hey,
prepper mentality.
in retrospect, I might have done that, but and everything was going as planned for the first 5 days of stay home or whatever, and then there was reports just yesterday or 2 days ago that the colony over had an outbreak at a mosque, where there were like 1,400 people. So now I think they're coming door to door and testing. And I noticed when I went out to get some essentials, I actually need a fire starter for my stove so I can cook. I ended up with matches, but um, the grocery store was suddenly closed, and I was like, oh no, because now they're worried it's a colony over, so they're not showing up for work, um, which makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we don't want these people to get sick, but without Amazon, I'm not sure what I'd be doing, and not so much Amazon, but without the food delivery and without e-commerce, I think we'd just be honestly, the situation has made me think about what I'd do if I was forced back into a hunter-gatherer society and if I'd even make it.
Get back to the roots, yeah.
I was like,
I know I wouldn't. I got a problem with a woodpecker damaging my chimney right now, and I'm like, could I even hit that if I needed to?
yeah, right. No, I don't know what I would do, and it's been really humbling to think about how many people in humanity lived without it. I mean, we are so privileged in that sense that I'm not sure I would know where to start. So I'm obviously grateful for God and everything He's given us, and where we're at. Yeah, e-commerce. The future of e-commerce is interesting, and I will bring it back to India. I've done some work out here, or just met a friend with this group called Indian Clusters, and she's written some very interesting papers on kind of where India's at, and your people should be thinking about this too, Steve. India is basically, her analysis is that basically the market for India e-commerce is only hit about 2% of where it could go.
Wow.
So we have room for so much growth, and these are people who could be used. They could jump on Amazon, or they could do it other ways. They could do it through their own system, whatever. But this sheer amount of materials and products that are sitting on streets, being sold in traditional marketplace settings that could work in an e-commerce setting is pretty profound, and it would really shift the way that India looked in terms of their economy. So that's something that I think here, at least, we're going to see people embrace e-commerce more and say, hey, we can't live without this, and then start to see some radical shift. And if that number goes from 2% to 10%, we're talking about adding, I mean, that adds 140 million new
customers
to your base, which is, I think, a third of the size of the US.
So real quick on Amazon in India, how big of a platform is that from your perspective today, and how many people use it?
Everybody uses it.
So Amazon's big in India then.
Not only is Amazon big in India, it makes me want to buy more stock in Amazon, because the thing is that I don't want to say people are lazy, but people love convenience, and they're more willing to pay for convenience than quality, and a lot of times nowadays, which doesn't say you can't get high quality products. It's more about the convenience side of this. There are ways to get the same product cheaper by going to the market, for sure, in India. But when I was getting my house set up, I went Amazon all the way, because the walk to the market, in terms of my hourly rate, cost me more than I would save by far. But Amazon is still charging American prices in India. So it was one of those things where I was like, I'm not getting the price break that I get everywhere else in India, the cost of living price break through
Sure.
Amazon. And they're just going to keep growing here. So I was like, that Amazon stock's going to keep going up, boys, because there's going to be that sort of thing all over the world. And as more and more people become economically capable of buying things off Amazon here, which I think is bound to happen, it's just going to grow. And India must be one country amongst 50 that has the same scenario. So
yeah, they're getting it off in the Netherlands, Australia, Japan, Middle East has been a big push for the Middle East in the last 30 days as well. The UEA. So we'll see what happens. Well, Sean, it was awesome catching up with you, and terrifying at the same time to hear about your flight and sinus issues. That's terrifying. But God bless with your efforts to help out in India while you're there, and while you're there by choice or stuck. I'm not sure which at the moment, but but God bless you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve, and good luck with everything and all of your customers as well. I hope you guys have great success, and try not to sell all the toilet paper. You might need some yourself.
I do have a toilet paper client, and yes, they stocked out. They sold out. All right. Well, thank you guys. That is the My Amazon Guy podcast. And my name is Stephen Pope. I'm the founder of My Amazon Guy. If you need any Amazon consulting, go to myamazonguy.com, and we hope you send this podcast to 3 people. 3 people is all it takes to spread the word. Thanks so much.